Okay, good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everybody to our August 3rd work session. All of our board members are present, including Dr. Bishop and several staff. All right, so the meeting is now called to order. And the item, we have one item on our agenda. Well, hey, good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everybody to our August 3rd work session. Okay, I think we're good now. All right. And so we have two items on our agenda, actually. Our first item is the fall mitigation plan that's presented by Dr. Bishop.
Thank you, Madam President and School Board. And I would like to request Tom Roth if he could perhaps sit up at the microphone, and then as your staff is needed, they are sitting, those kind folks right there in front of us, and to answer specific questions, they also can come up to the microphone. So we're happy to share that released as a proposal, our proposal, the team's proposal for entering schools safely soon, August 17th. And I want to start to let the board know and the community that if parents are online or students, we did send this directly to their emails, and the form looks like this. I'm not so sure. It says, keep ASD symptom free. If you're following along as well, Board Docs has this document. It is a single, very simplistic document that has the information you'll need, very briefly given. So for the academic models, we are happy to say doors open, full classes, full schedules, and the times are attached: 7:30 beginning of the day for high school, middle 8:15, and elementary at 9 a.m. We say full day, full schedule because last year part of the mitigation technique was to cohort students, limit movement, limit lunchtime, different aspects of it, not intermix two different grade levels of students and whatnot. So what we were learning at that time, that was the best defense. What we now know after a year are that other layers of mitigation really work the best, and that students can interact with each other given the mitigation techniques that we're going to share. So the academic models, we're happy to say, I just received a question the other day, so this might be on people's minds. Is high school going to have Wednesdays off for hybrid? No. We are offering a virtual program, and we have several homeschool programs, but high schools are 5 days a week, 6 periods a day for students to re-engage in their learning. Same is true for middle school with 7 periods. And then, of course, elementary, for the lingo at that age is the specials. You get to go to your library, your PE, your art, and one's missing: library, PE, art, music. So specials are back in, of course, in music and other. We have additional mitigation techniques in some of our special classes. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tom Roth, Chief Operating Officer, and his team to really share the specifics, because much of the mitigation is in the technical aspect of transportation and cleaning and ventilation and items such as that. So we are all here to answer questions, and Mark Stock and his team are ready and willing to answer questions in the instructional model. But with that, the majority of questions, I think, might come in the operations. So, Mr. Roth, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop. Through the board president. So what we would like to do today, as the superintendent described, is to provide information on the 2021-2022 return to school operational guidelines. And the product that the superintendent referenced, this is similar to a product that the district developed last school year that has been updated to reflect current conditions, as well as to represent certain systems that the district has developed really since the start of the pandemic that we've had the opportunity to develop, refine, and practice. The team in the room is, as mentioned, my team from my health services senior director and our senior nurse. I've got Miss Heather Philp, who's our senior director for transportation, Darren Hargraves, my senior director for maintenance and operations, and his deputy director, Rob Holland, really focused on the operations side of the house. Miss Ashley Lawley, who is the district director for security and emergency preparedness. So if I may, before we get into that, I did ask the board president if we could spend just a couple of moments talking about emergency response drills in the boardroom. So I'll first just comment for those who are not aware that the dais that you are sitting at actually has Kevlar panels. In the very, very, very unlikely event that we would have a shooting type of threat, that the action is to immediately drop to the floor and get protection from the ballistic Kevlar. Also, the board president, her workstation has a duress button. I believe you're aware of that, President Bellamy. That duress button actually connects to Guardian, but there's a very quick link from Guardian to APD in an emergency, as well as our own immediate response. So with regards to if there are circumstances that would inform a need to vacate the boardroom, I just want to briefly talk, and I may bring Miss Lawley up to elaborate on details. But if we have a reason, there are really two primary scenarios that would result in a departure from the boardroom or the board president to declare a recess. So the first would be administrative, where there is a decision by the board president to deliberate on an item, at which point generally what happens is the board will relocate into room 150, which is to your left. But there may be circumstances that may be a little bit more exigent that would require a quicker departure from the room. And in that situation, what we propose is that the board would actually go through the door immediately behind you into the health services room. Now, again, the two scenarios in that one is that if there were some sort of disturbance happening in the board that was no real physical threat, but it was preventing the board from conducting a meeting, the board president, again, could call a recess and then exit through that door described. In an example there, it would be a determination by the board president, and then the board members would exit through that door. There may be circumstances that are a bit more threatening, where it may appear that things may become more physical. In that case, it may be a decision, a directive, a very strong recommendation coming either from myself or the security director for the board to leave, with or without a decision, a vocal decision to recess, in which case, again, we would ask, based on that threat, that the board would go through that door, and then the last person through the door would throw the lock and be secured inside that room, at which point, as things subsided, that we would basically call an all clear, and that we would notify the board that it was appropriate in that circumstance to return into the boardroom. So I will happily pause at this time and between myself and Ms. Lawley, entertain any questions or any comments on that. Again, it's very unlikely that it would happen, but we just wanted folks to kind of get into this muscle memory if those circumstances were to present.
Thank you, Mr. Roth. Anybody have any questions? I appreciate the review.
Thank you, Madam President. So at this time, I'd like to transition to the operational guidelines. And what I propose to do, and I don't want to insult anybody's intelligence, but I am going to read verbatim each of the entries on the sheet in front of you, at which point I'm going to pause. And there may be some elaborating comments on these. They're pretty straightforward. And also to allow time for questions and for comments, and then we will proceed to the next. So the first is Dr. Bishop mentioned, academic model, that we will have full-length in-person school days and virtual learning models, allowing families to choose the best model for their needs. The full-length school day schedule is as follows, and you'll see listed: high school from 7:30 in the morning to 2, middle school from 8:15 to 2:45, elementary from 9 a.m. to 3:30. And these times mirror the times for school prior to closure in March of 2020. So at this time, Dr. Bishop, I'll pause. Okay. So moving to the next, cleaning and disinfecting. Regular cleaning and disinfecting will occur on buses, in schools, and in administrative offices. Classrooms will be cleaned daily. Exceptional disinfection in schools will occur as needed. So to very briefly elaborate on that, operations does retain additional capacity. If we had a very significant outbreak, that operations could surge support to a facility or a school to do a much more deliberate and expedited disinfection. Okay. No questions?
Any questions on disinfecting? Okay.
Moving on to physical distancing. Physical distancing of 3 to 6 feet should be observed in all district classrooms and buildings to the extent possible, but should not exclude students from in-person learning to keep a minimum distance requirement. Okay. Face coverings. Face coverings are required for all students, staff, and visitors while inside ASD schools and buildings. Some exceptions may apply for educational purposes and for cohorting people who are fully vaccinated. Face coverings are not required for outdoor activities.
And Madam President, I do want to share that on our website, and the information we provided principals is that our recommendation is for these to go into effect on Monday, August 9th.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop. Moving to hand washing, hand sanitizing. I'm sorry, Madam President.
Can I?
Yes.
So I think it might be, board, do you think we can get through the list and then come back to your questions? Otherwise, we can spend the whole time on one item. Is that agreeable? Who disagrees? Thank you. Mr. Roth, let's just go through and then come back.
That's too easy. So hand washing, hand sanitizing. Hand sanitizer will be available in all schools and on buses. Frequent hand washing and or sanitizing will occur throughout the school day. And I just want to comment very briefly that during the last academic year, the district procured a very significant amount of commodities that we require for sanitization, disinfection, and those type activities that we still retain a very large quantity. And we have an ordering system in place that allows a school in need to request through their BPO, and then it is provided through our warehouse. That system is in place, and if we need more, we're obviously in a position to procure additional material. Transportation. Face coverings are required for students, bus drivers, and attendants on school buses. Some routes may have assigned seating. Meals and water breaks. Meals will be served to students and consumed in cafeterias and other school settings at school discretion. Classrooms. Classrooms will be cleaned daily. Desk barriers or other partitions may be used at school discretion. HVAC. School building ventilation systems will be activated 2 hours before school starts and kept running 2 hours after the school day ends to ensure air exchanges. And this is a practice that we implemented last semester that worked very well. Student, staff, health, and safety. Nurses and trained staff will be on site to screen students and staff showing symptoms of illness. Proper isolation protocols will be followed in the event of suspected cases in schools or administrative buildings. Recess. Mask wearing will be optional for students during outdoor recess. Volunteers and visitors. School volunteers and visitors are welcome. Volunteers and visitors will be required to follow district procedures and protocols and should not visit any ASD facility if symptomatic, COVID positive, or in quarantine. Sports, extracurricular activities. Indoor and outdoor sports and extracurricular activities such as dances, assemblies, school spirit gatherings, fine art performances, and club activities may be available to students and spectators. For indoor sports, athletes will wear masks if on the sideline. Spectators will be expected to wear masks during indoor competitions and events. Mask wearing will be optional for all outdoor sports and activities, consistent with CDC guidance.
Okay.
So shifting to some general guidance to staff and to parents. Symptomatic students and staff keep ASD symptom-free. Parents and guardians should conduct a symptom screening of their student and keep their student home if exhibiting symptoms. Parents and guardians are strongly encouraged to have symptomatic students tested for COVID-19. The same standards apply for symptomatic staff. Reporting and communication. Parents are strongly encouraged to notify schools if their student is a confirmed COVID-19 positive or close contact. Schools will report confirmed cases, students, and or staff using the district's online COVID-19 report format. The district will communicate findings and recommendations to affected staff and students' families. Communications will be specific to individuals or group. And I guess I would, to clarify that last point, through this communication process, if you're a parent of a student who is a close contact, you will get a direct communication from the district. Whereas if you are a parent of a student who attends a school but is not a close contact, you will be notified that there was an incident in the school, but that your student was not considered to be a close contact. So different communication, but again, it's a notification. So parents will know if an incident happened in their school. Testing. ASD will provide testing to symptomatic staff and students either through school nurses or a contracted provider with parents or guardian consent. Municipal sites will continue to provide testing at locations throughout the municipality. The district does have an existing contract with Beacon to provide that symptomatic testing. It's currently located at 5 schools. We also have 22 schools that are equipped with the Abbott ID Now test system, which actually is a very timely, quick turn in that once a sample is tested, we can get results within 15 to 20 minutes. Vaccination. ASD will provide COVID-19 vaccines to eligible students with parent or guardian consent, staff, and community members through a contracted provider. The district will also continue to perform vaccination clinics to include flu and other state required vaccinations in schools as needed. And again, we do have an existing contract, same vendor, Beacon, to provide the vaccine support. So with that, Madam President, that is the operational guideline guidance. We are at this time happy to entertain any questions from board members.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Roth. Member Donnelly, are you ready?
One concern I have, Mr. Roth, we've got a lot of instructors and administrators kind of go their own way in this district.
We had a study done last year and found out that our reading curriculum is sitting in, wrapped up in classrooms never used. We've had music instructors refusing to teach the national anthem, even though it's part of the adopted curriculum. We've got schools that didn't do the Pledge of Allegiance every day, even though it was part of board policy that they would. So we can anticipate, I think, that there may be problems with this. And if somebody in authority decides they're going to require more masking than the policy requires, how are we going to prevent that? And how are we going to hold them accountable to the public and to parents and to the kids?
Really, I'll, through the president to Member Donnelly, that's really on me. And when we do have reports of something, we investigate, we take things seriously. The expectation is that this is the expectation for our students and staff, and will work. To your point, I don't think there's, we have 7 board members and not every board member does similar. Think about 6,000 employees and 42,000 students. So people are human, and if there's an error made, we'll give them guidance to understand the policy better, and that if there's a continued lack of appropriate administration of this policy or other policies, we investigate and we address it at that level. That's what we do. So I could see this happening in the same manner if we have a report that someone is taking it. Was your question above and beyond what's listed? Yeah, that's when we find out, we'll investigate and look into the situation and provide a follow through.
Well, I'm concerned that we've never enforced our our reading curriculum, and I don't think there's been any accountability on the part of our instructors to refuse to use it in violation of board policy. So,
point of order, are we talking about reading curriculum or masking?
Yeah, if we can keep right now we're talking about the fall mitigation
plan. Talking about accountability. I was interrupted, and we're talking about accountability.
Member Donnelly,
and there's accountability is consistency.
I understand.
And if we're not enforcing board policy in one area, it's related to enforcement of board policy in another area. So I don't appreciate being interrupted like that.
Member Donnelly, other people will have questions. It was not my intent to interrupt. A point of order was called.
Well, it wasn't a point of order. It was not made as a point of order. It was an argument.
We can disagree on that. But if you will continue with your follow-up about the plan, I would appreciate it.
I don't have faith in the accountability that's going to be exercised out there to not let people go rogue on us and over-enforce, demand masks in times where the policy doesn't require it because they're not following our board policy as it is on other items. So I want to know how they're going to be held accountable if they start demanding little kids wear masks outside when it isn't required by the policy. And so far I've heard, well, we'll work with them and we'll do this. This is what we always say. But when are we really going to hold people accountable for not following board policy? With letters of instruction.
I would like to answer. We do have letters of instruction. They're just not to the purview because of law. And I think our HR expert would tell you for board members to know.
So board members, let's go around. You have let's do one question and one follow-up until everybody has had an opportunity. So Member Higgins, did I see your hand?
Oh, is that better? Oh, thank you. And first of all, I understand and I agree with the superintendent. They can't tell you what actions they've taken because of a personnel matter in regards to it. I think you obviously can evaluate outcomes in your own perspective, but they can't share that with you in regards to what actions they would take. That would be a violation. That would be a significant issue. And if we got involved below an executive level in regards to any consequences, we'd be in violation of merit system principles that are part of the city charter, the municipal charter. A few comments. One, first of all, I appreciate the briefing. And I think this is headed in the right direction, requiring masks. I'm going to be upfront about that. The CDC guidelines are clear. I can tell you, I grew up in Louisiana, and right now when you see the emergency rooms and the ICUs full and you know that there's young kids in there, this is not what it was a year ago. This is a different level, and it's a different consequence. What bothers me is I don't know where this is headed. We're being told this is going to be worse than what it was before. Some of that prediction's out there. And so, one, making sure that we are prepared if we have to close schools again, if we are forced in that position, because it spreads so rapidly compared to anything else we've had in the past, that we're prepared for that. But I'm also thinking in terms of students that have to sit out of class for a week or 2 weeks, making sure that there's some way to help them continue and not just consider it just that's normal sick time, that we have some way of continuing their education. And I don't know what the plan is on that, but that's a real concern. In the spring, I had a grandchild that was out with it, and they lost another week. And then I said, after everything they've lost, they're doing it offside. They couldn't even continue it, and they lost that time. And I just don't want to see that continue. We may have classrooms closed. We may have school closed, and it will be for shorter periods of time. And I just don't want kids to suffer anymore with lost time with school. That's my biggest concern. And the second one is some school districts have done actually some high outcomes at home. They've done some different things. And whatever they've done, I hope that we're exploring that to say, what can we do different this time that we didn't do last time in regards to it? In retrospect, last time, I wish we had waited a week, even though spring breaking was good, but we'd have waited a week, we would have contacted more kids before they left. I think the response to the emergency was appropriate, though. I'm not questioning. It's just a hindsight type of look of saying, what can we do to make sure we don't have that kind of break again? And is there something from an academic standpoint when you're at home that other school districts have done that have got surprisingly high results? I know there are so many different online types of options and systems, even tablets that can download stuff if they don't have the Wi-Fi. So there are options out there, and I would just hope that we're discussing that in regards to making this a better experience than what we've had to face the last year, because the kids can't afford this type of outcome repeatedly over and over and over again. So the question is, one, what do we do when they're out for a week? And two, are there changes in the way we did it last year that we can do different this year, looking at the models that other school districts have gotten better results with?
Dr. Bishop?
Yep, through the President to Member Higgins, those are great questions. And the first one is, I technically really should land on Member Donnelly pretty well too. It's really aligning with consistency, the platform with which we use. The first time we went out at the pandemic, teachers had different platforms for online. We moved all to Canvas. And the expectation is that your course planning, your information, that actually does become a tool so that parents and students know. And that was a request from parents saying, you know what, my child has 6 classes. There's 3 different platforms. We need to narrow this. So last year we built our muscle around that Canvas platform. Even going back, the requirement is to have your courses on Canvas so that they can be accessed. I have read some studies of places that have done well. And again, it goes back to really having the curriculum that is to be learned, what the student is learning. So it's, again, the alignment with the standards that they're supposed to, and utilizing, when you're at home, that platform consistently and ubiquitously for courses. So it's tied to the pandemic. It's tied to alignment. It's tied to goals that we really have to circle around, understanding what is it that kids need to know and how are we going to know it, and utilize the tools that can ensure that when kids are in and out, that their parents and they themselves, when they're older, can navigate the system and catch up. And actually, some of these have recordings. Last year, elementary kept pace with different, presenting different lessons to support the teaching and learning, did a great job with that. With masks, one of the things about what we can do this year because the goal for the American Academy of Pediatrics, as well as CDC, is to not close schools. And so what's different from this year to last year is that students wearing masks, if they are close contact without symptoms, they don't have to quarantine. The majority of our school closures were not due to cases. They were due to one student being a close contact of several people and having to close down. So we are confident that this mitigation plan, to your point, will hopefully keep kids in school and keep them open, because if they don't have symptoms and they have a mask properly worn, then we can move forward and, for students anyway, not have to quarantine, the mandatory quarantine. The only way our adults in the system don't have to quarantine is by getting a vaccination. So having unvaccinated adults with masks, that they still need to quarantine. And I would say that some of our classrooms, for your knowledge, they were shut down not due to cases of students, but adults not being able to come to the building.
Did you have a follow-up?
Yes, I did. Thank you. I appreciate the information. I am one. The one thing I would ask is that if we're going to go through policy changes in the future, to pull back or make changes with this, if we can get an opportunity to have an exchange of that before that gets implemented, so that, because I know this is going to be the CDC and the American Academy of Pediatricians, they provide kind of guidelines. It varies based upon where you are and all the other issues within that. So if we can have a chance to have an exchange of that, if we're going to make any changes from this in advance of doing that, I would appreciate that.
Okay, thank you, Member Higgins. Okay, let's just go around the table. Member blue shirt. No, I'm joking. It's all four of them have blue shirts on. Member Holloman.
I have trouble remembering it myself on certain days. Not really a question right at this point, but something I would suggest. The last year, it was an emergency. We went into it and did what we thought we had to do, and we all thought it would be over by now, I think. But it is clear that a lot of people don't understand what we're trying to do with masks, or they don't understand what we're trying to do with certain mitigations. And I'm suggesting that we should build maybe a wiki or an online database of just standardizing answers about why we're doing certain things. At times, I think some of the lack of symmetry with what staff are doing comes from a misunderstanding of what we're actually trying to accomplish. And I would say to Member Donnelly, having been part of that workforce for quite a while, most people are trying to do the right thing. You do have some that aren't. I mean, that happened. In my experience, most of the time they did get dealt with. There's a chain of command, and there are weak links down at the bottom, and there are weak links in the middle sometimes. But I think we work at it as well as working at a lot of other things. And the compliance with policy generally is pretty good. The non-compliant areas do stand out. They get a lot of attention, but I don't think they characterize the workforce in general. So I think we'll have a lot of support for it. I think if we have a clear understanding that people can reference, we'll get a little bit more as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Member Wilson.
I do have a question in regarding where it states some exceptions may apply. Are there guidelines that have been laid out for the exceptions that may apply, and how does that include our students with disabilities? How does that address our students with disabilities as well?
Thank you. Through the president, to Member Wilson, many of the exceptions would apply specifically to an IEP, for instance, and so those could be varied depending. But again, we work with, the CDC and the ADA, American with Disabilities Act, but they're very specific to individual plans. In a more global sense, there might be continuing to follow CDC guidelines with mitigation strategies. But there are times that for language learning and some other types of activities that a mask might be able to be taken off with parent permission for 15 or so minutes to be able to make this formation of your mouth so I can see that you know how to make the sound of the blend, and or provided a face shield in classrooms instead. We have thousands of those to give out to classrooms and teachers that request them. For music, they're going to take their mask off. However, the other mitigation that we have is this kind of thing that I'm terrible to use it's like this covering. It's a mask for an instrument. The air time where the air blows out, I could have spit. And so that's also covered, and they make them specifically. You might have seen them if you've watched a band football this year play. So we did purchase 30,000 of those at the end of last year. We're pretty set. So again, it's very detailed. If there's a request, it'll go through the principal. If the principal doesn't have enough knowledge and is guessing, then we have their supervisor. And if they don't know, of course, we have Nurse Bell and Jennifer Petronas, Director Petronas, to be able to answer those questions. And so there isn't any universal, we're going to do this outside of probably music or maybe that speech class that I'm one-on-one with a child. But that's not to say that they won't come up, because we have creative classrooms and kids do lots of things, and it might come up that, man, we need to take our masks off. But it would be within the 15 minutes, guidance from CDC and things like that. So I hope that answers the question. Enough. And if something does come up that the board is wanting to know about, we can answer that specifically. But in general, we wanted to allow that flexibility because some of our parents are requesting that through their IEDA in their plans, as well as some teachers are thinking ahead. I think you saw one from a first grade teacher saying, "Oh, that's terrible for my phonics lesson. Can I have clear masks?" And I emailed the principal already to say, "Yep, get a hold of Jen Petronas, let that teacher know." So, but again, it's going to be with very deliberate actions.
Okay, did you have a follow-up, Member Wilson? Thank you. All right, Member Lessons.
Great, thank you. So I have a whole list of questions. I don't really know what's appropriate to just.
So you get to ask one and one follow-up, and then we'll come back around.
So I'm going to, I guess, go at the 10,000 foot level, and that is, can we have this document, or whatever it morphs into, make a clear commitment to say ASD will follow CDC guidance? Because it doesn't directly say that it does. There's one little blurb under one of the subsets under sports. It says consistent with CDC guidance. But if there was something sort of at the operational level, that would give families, it would give teachers, it would give the community a sense of, okay, this is what's going to happen. When the science evolves, when CDC shifts its advice based on evidence, ASD would adapt to that changing epidemiological knowledge.
So making sure I understand your question. So at the bottom of the page where it says consistent with CDC guidance, you'd like more than that.
Well,
is that what you're saying?
I guess I never noticed that there was a little asterisk. Oh, I see. Yes, with a discretion.
So,
I guess I'm interested in applying best known practices to our school district as clearly as possible.
Okay.
And some kind of, like when you buy a toothpaste at the grocery store and it says it's ADA approved. I'm looking for something like that.
On the surface, through the president to Member Lessons, that sounds just great. However, it doesn't really having a masking policy and moving forward with what works for ASD. We use the science and the expertise of people. We're not strict CDC, and if we were, especially with the American Academy of Pediatrics as well, last year we would have been in school a lot sooner. And it was mentioned that people don't trust the CDC because of the president at the time. And so I would just like to have the board recall those conversations last year and say, now we want to do that because perhaps there's a change. And so there was some issue with CDC last year when we were moving to get children back in that we shouldn't trust them. And now this year we want to. So I would prefer just to stay out of that and say that, you know, we do have professionals, medical professionals, we have operational professionals, we have educational professionals that have students' best interest in mind. And having a trigger to trigger us when perhaps there is a discussion needed, as Member Higgins suggested, that it wouldn't be an automatic thing. And I'm telling the truth that literally occurred last year. So I'm just, from my experience of working through a pandemic, I would caution against another trigger that would have us act without thoughtful inclusion of all of our system people. We created this task force, provided input, let everyone speak, the employees and their leaders to be able to understand. And that's how this came about. It just took time. So an outside, I don't know if I'm making sense, but an outside trigger might disrupt and might not be the best thing that we can move forward.
Yeah,
With that, I might not be explaining it well.
And I guess I would challenge if you look at the CDC guidance with regards to K-12 schools, we're compliant. As I'm looking at them right now. So I think as a district, as a staff, we have adapted to the evolving science and the guidance that comes with that, as well as, I mean, the balancing, if you will, the multiple ranges of opinions on this topic. I think the district is pretty straight with regards to our compliance with the CDC guidance, which in my mind does demonstrate a commitment.
Thank you. I guess I get a follow up. I don't doubt the district's commitment to our children, and I'll say thanks to everybody for working really hard, and also hat tip to Katie Grant for working really hard on behalf of the board. If we're going to stay consistent with CDC guidance on some of these, the face coverings right now, that's a CDC guidance. So maybe there need to be a few more asterisks that are added here and there to let people know where the advice is coming from, where the decisions are. I mean, because as of a week ago, the AAP and CDC had different advice. Great, I give you that. I guess I'm looking for that transparency. I feel like among the hundreds of emails that I've read, people have said, well, what sources are they reading? Could you be a little bit more clear? And I'm looking for that transparency and a steadiness for our community to know that when we're monitoring something, it will translate into action in one way or another. There's nothing on here to show, and this is a second sort of question, but there's nothing here to show that this is subject to kids under 12 having access to a vaccine. So I have a lot of questions. I should probably end it there.
Dr. Bishop.
Yeah, those are great questions, though, and they're because people are asking them, so they're good questions. I would just like to say that the CDC always does go back to community conditions as well, and I did make a recommendation for optional masking this summer, and it was, even though they said vaccinated people, you don't have to wear masks, we knew that children were unvaccinated, but they also say in the same guidance that you should consider your community conditions. At that time, we were having 2 cases in our state. I think it was absolutely appropriate to have optional masking over the summer. And so, but if you were to take the part about masking and the part about this in the CDC and this, it's just so complex that a trigger point, I think, would not move us forward. And that wouldn't be as transparent, because then we might be asked, well, why aren't you considering this piece of evidence? Why aren't you considering this piece of evidence? It's just, I wish it was that simple, because then my job would be that simple and then everyone would know it. But it just doesn't occur that way. Not in ASD, not in our city, our state, or our nation, or our world for that matter.
Thank you. Member Jacobs.
There we go. All right. Thank you to the administration for the walkthrough, and I appreciate some of the history, especially last year as a new board member. So I also have some questions regarding I'll start with the meal and water breaks. Could we be given some examples as to what that might look like in practice at school locations, and if it's going to differ from just a normal lunch day or a normal day at lunch?
Member, through the president, and may I call Dan Barker as well as Mark Stock to share some information about what it really looks like. I think this is more elementary, and our secondary senior director had to step out, and Dr. Stock's ready to answer, as well as Dan Barker. So if you just want to talk through, maybe give a mind's eye of things.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop. I'll just give a general answer regarding all the schools. And essentially, we'll be running normal lunches in the sense of cafeteria style, wherever appropriate. Schools, as able, can extend those distances and do different things on their own to try to make that better. There will be schools that already serve in the classrooms by choice, and they may continue that. So I'll turn to Dan to see if, I don't know what number that would be, but so there are some options that schools would have there. But for the most part, it's lunch like we remember.
Dan Barker, Senior Director of Elementary. To echo what Dr. Stock just said, the main meal time is going to be lunch. We do have, as you folks I know are aware, a wide range of physical campuses where our lunches are served. Some of those schools are in point actually even designed to eat in their rooms. They'll continue practices similar to last year. Others by choice have chosen to do that for various things having to do with staff available to monitor kids and how they use that time even when they're eating at in some scenarios to use it for reading time and other activities. That'll look very similar to last year where kiddos have masks and they pull them down to eat and they would move them back up. The piece that would be different this year is our return to using the congregate lunchroom settings for the lunch meal, and that would be similar in that it would be a larger lunchroom setting. You would have often anywhere from 2 to 5. That's a ballpark estimate of classes that are in there at a time having their meal time. They also would be practicing a similar action, working with the adult supervisors in the room. Pull down your mask to eat, you put it back up afterwards. Elementary schools in almost all cases do practice a snack time, so to speak, depending really on when the students have their formal lunch period. And that also would be handled the same time. Those would be handled in classrooms a majority of the time. Occasionally, like in the fall or the spring, when weather's nice outside, you'll have classes that also head outside to do that. I think that touches that question.
Thank you, Mr. Barker and Dr. Stock. Just a quick follow-up, I guess that pertains to the guidelines as a whole. Member Donnelly spoke to staff not adhering to the plan that's laid out and by the administration, and I agree that we need to make sure everyone's on the same page. I've gotten emails, I'm sure the rest of the board has as well, indicating that there's concern from parents that and some objection to the plan as laid out. Have we begun discussions as to what that might look like on a school basis in terms of reacting to that objection?
At the elementary level, we've just actually this week begun some of our training conversations with principals. From my lens, that supervision would be very similar to how we expect supervision in all those settings. Now, keep in mind, Our meal settings aren't always supervised by the same folks who are with the kiddos during the day. Those folks all are encountering that process with different levels of skills and working with students in different comfort and different settings. Their first expectation would be to have that explained as the site supervisor what the expectation is. Places where there are concerns, those need to be brought forward to that principal. Principal works with the staff to correct those concerns as needed. If that doesn't address it, we move through the rest of our process with them reaching out for help to my office and then beyond if necessary.
Yeah, and I would just like to add that with any large group, with people coming together with differences, schools really rely on relational capacity that they've built with students. I think that was the crux of your question. Like when people come and say, I don't want to follow this, or I do want to follow this. There's lots of different rules, if you will, of going to a school, from students where to park and, all kinds of things through sports and classes and this. And the capacity of our schools and our teachers, I think, are pretty high. I mean, we need to support them in our investment in capturing kids' hearts and the other SEL things we've been doing. Build the leadership capacity to, rather than a carrot or a stick. It's really involving people and understanding the bigger picture and the relational capacity before that. So that's always our first go round, because on a daily basis, whether it's I don't want to wear a mask, there's also I'm not going to take out my pencil. I'm going to not, it is common, although this adds another layer. But I want to share with you that I'm confident that they have the support and that the GIMBA, the people on the ground, have the best relational capacity with people. And it's just those that maybe need more assistance than they're just given assistance and gone to the principal first and then up the chain, if you will. But when all said and done, we have really great people in a great district and great families. I don't expect it to be a battle, although right now it feels like that. I think it'll come around because, again, the best thing is that we're not shutting down schools with masks because we don't have to quarantine. It's like, yeah, let's go. So I don't know if you have anything to add, but I kind of sense that might have been your question, not necessarily on supervision of kids in the adult section, but what happens when there's really this
No, I absolutely agree with Dr. Bishop's comments. I think I would just add that at its heart, our kids and their parents who are going to be showing up on our first day at school, they really want to be in school. They want it, I believe in most cases, more than their families do. And if you had a chance to be in the schools this spring, you would have seen that. As Dr. Bishop said, it's a normal part of working in an elementary school setting where you're working with kiddos on compliance, and some of that is willful, and some of it is accidental, and some of it is a process of working those relationships. There's always, with as many numbers as we do it, there's always going to be scenarios where non-compliance maybe happens for reasons other than what's going on in that little person's thinking at the time. But we have some pretty established processes to work through that, and we are here to support our schools and our principals in that work.
Thank you.
So I'd like to just thank the task force for all the work. It kind of feels like we're back in March when we were testing out all of our mitigation. The difference is we have a vaccine. We know that it works because it worked in the spring. And I just think that keeping our kids safe and trying to figure it out, there is no plea. I know we can't please everybody, but if our motivation is to keep our kids as safe as possible, I think the task force has come up with a plan that feels good for me as a grandma now. So anyway, I just want to thank the task force for their work on this. I do also want to echo a couple of things. The loss of time. I'm glad that we don't have to quarantine whole classes anymore because of one exposure. That's really important because you don't ever reclaim that time. And the compliance piece, while I absolutely understand how important that is because it has not always worked. But I want to look forward to making sure our staff have what they need to do what we're asking them to do. And that we take an effort to make sure we meet with parents in some form or way. I know the email that went out, people got it. But I suspect schools are going to have to be a little more, probably be on the front line for answering parent questions.
Sure. Madam President, I'd like to add as well that, of course, Dan shared they're really building capacity and principals to be able to answer, but Dr. Zink and her team they're also going to host health echoes again with our health department to just be open to parents to call in about other questions as well. So we're going to give those to the Dr. Zinks of the world and also give that level. So there's on many levels, there's some planning around that.
Okay, we have a little bit of time left, although we won't get to our last part of our agenda. So let's go, Member Higgins.
Thank you. I just a couple of comments real quick. First of all, I work in a hospital. I can tell you one of the big issues out there is even if you've got the vaccine, you can become positive and you can spread it. So, but 97% of the people in the hospital and in the ICUs are those that didn't get the vaccination. So you're requiring everybody to wear the mask makes sense under these circumstances. And the most vulnerable group, and we're seeing in the past, we said the young ones are protected. Today, that's not the case. Those are the ones filling up hospital rooms too. And so I would hope something like that gets put into this educational bit that we put on the website reflects something along those lines. That's why we're requiring everyone to wear masks. And I think that makes sense. And the only other comment is that I read it came out with the news in regards to what we're doing on Saturday. And I just, from a communication standpoint, I support what the superintendent's doing at this point. I like the changes. I'd like to get in front of that next time, though, that when it comes out that we know we're together, because I never want to get out there and give any mixed messages to the public in regards that we're not totally supportive of it, because I think this is safety for kids. And if there's one thing that's most critical to us on the school board, safety comes before anything. We can't put kids at risk, and we have to do the best we can with education while keeping them safe. So thank you.
Thank you. Member Donnelly?
Yeah, my understanding is that we get federal funding for testing. Is that correct, Tom?
Through the president to Member Donnelly. So yes, indirectly, the district is receiving federal assistance through the municipality. Again, this contract that we have for testing and vaccination is reimbursable.
Well, my research indicates that one of the strongest ways to protect our children would be through a more robust testing program rather than masks. Masks seem very questionable as far as the evidence that they're actually effective in any way in a school setting. So why don't we have a more robust testing program, since it's covered by federal funding? Why don't we have that?
So through the president, I guess Member Donnelly, I would challenge the robust aspect to that we do have testing internal to the district. Our focus primarily is for symptomatic staff and students. The municipality also has testing. You can go to any department store, Walgreens, Fred Meyer, to get tested. There's a significant capability that's resident within the municipality as well as the district. Our challenge, quite frankly, would be that if you can have a robust program, it's going to be conducted by who? Your nurses. If you're expecting your nurses to do that, then they're not going to be available to provide nursing support to a majority of students in a school. So I would submit to you that we do have a good program, that it is inclusive of both symptomatic and asymptomatic, not just in the district, but in the municipality. And that, again, the challenge, if you really want to expand it, is there is a gap in capability to take that on.
Yes, Dr. Bishop.
We do, however, have that testing once a week, and we're going to continue that for sports because of the times that cases have come to school. It was in full contact sports. And so we have experience overlaying on teams and the significance of the work and actually people to do the work. It doesn't always occur as we would like. It's all just to have, as he said, the staffing to be able to do it, even with our contractor. But we, through last year, we tested every athlete every week to be able to compete, and that was actually pretty cumbersome, and some things got through. And we can have our medical folks talk about that, but district wide, I don't think that we'd have the human capacity to do that.
Okay, Member Holloman, we are, I'd just like to note that we are at the end of our time together, but go on.
But this is just in reference to Member Donnelly's comment. Masks do have a great effect. They're not a cure-all, they don't do everything, but there's a ton of science that talks about what different kinds of masks do accomplish in specific situations. We're trying to prevent the spread from infected people to others. That's a little different than why people wear them in certain situations. But I think we do need to have a clear message to the public. We understand why we're doing it, and there's a ton of science that supports those steps. It won't eliminate COVID. It won't stop it completely, but it will greatly reduce the movement of it within our buildings, which I think is a big goal. We don't want kids showing up and taking COVID back to a home that didn't have it. The mask will go a long way towards making that a reality. I hope that message is one that we can all carry in a strong voice. And if there is science that says what we're doing doesn't accomplish that, I would love to see it, because yeah, it's a lot of energy and expense and effort by a lot of people. We don't want to do it unless it is accomplishing that. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Member Lessons.
I have one quick question that hopefully will open the door for future discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Is this a lie? I mean, this document is going to go into, be implemented on August 9th. We have 77, by my count, people registered to testify tonight. We've received lots and lots of emails, some of which have had really great suggestions, practical suggestions, like the teacher that you referenced, that, ASD provides more clear masks. To what extent is this going to be subject to revision? How frequently would that happen? And will it be revised with respect to any issues brought up tonight by the community?
Through the board president to Member Lessons, we actually do have a Q&A, and it might be what Mr. Higgins was referring to. Those Q&As aren't complete yet. We have a health Q&A, an HR Q&A, operational Q&A that we keep on our website for the most asked questions and answers to keep, or somebody mentioned, maybe Member Wilson, to just keep the information response. I knew it came from that side of the table. So one of those three board members mentioned that. And so our Q&As are not posted yet. We're having our experts and drill down into them in regard to the questions that they're getting. As far as with the amount of questions, what we do is see like what comes out and then where can we answer it. A thing like a mask from a teacher, that's handled really at the building level. We shared that. We just had to remind the teacher and the principal to go there. So staff questions really should be routed through their principal. And then the principal then, can contact. But the number of questions that we get, as we see a trend and that we have to adjust, we generally do another Q&A or might need to adjust it. But I'm not so sure about this evening about what will happen. This is already posted on our website.
Okay. And the other thing that comes to my mind, though, Member Lessons, is the fact that, what we hear tonight really will give us information relative to maybe not this iteration. This is probably the 6th iteration in less than a year. And so as we go through, that we are flexible and we do take in information so that we can respond to people in ways that they are that's meaningful and matter to them. So part of the timing on all of this with getting through summer school, because we actually right now we have two guidances in place. We have the optional one for summer school, which ends on the 6th, and then we've got to get ready for the year. So I like to think that we are flexible, and a lot of the things that the board brought up today, we need to probably visit again too, and as we continue to do the best we can to keep our kids safe. So it is 5:05. I will entertain a motion to go into executive session.
So just a quick point of order. Do you
Yes.
intend to have any kind of vote tonight on this mask policy?
So this was not an item that we voted on in the past. We accepted it, we made recommendations. So when it comes back up again tonight, you will have another opportunity to ask questions and get clarifications. I mean, it's up to the board. We have not voted on the superintendent's recommendation before. We've accepted it and moved on. So what is the will of the board?
Well,
Andy, do I have that correct?
That's my understanding, that the superintendent is directed to implement policy unless we were to choose to direct her otherwise.
Yeah.
So unless there would be a motion, we wouldn't be taking a vote on anything.
Right. So this, again, it will come up. So I know you got more questions, member lessons. We will try to entertain as many of them as we can when the superintendent gives her update. But as of right now, this is our plan pending, a further discussion and your questions, of course. All right. I'll entertain a motion.
I move to adjourn to executive session for the purposes of personnel and negotiations update.
All right.
Second.
Are there any opposes? All right.